Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Those of you just now joining us online on Facebook, those of you who are online with us on the Zoom, quite a few people here today, as well as those of you here live with us at the shul. Bo Chaba, welcome. As they say in some foreign lands, bienvenido. As we welcome today, we not only welcome the Shabbat, but today is also Shabbat HaKodesh. Shabbat HaKodesh is the Holy Sabbath. It's the Sabbath that is just before the month of Nisan, the month of Aviv, the month of the Passover, the month of the Exodus. And it takes place either on the day of, if today was 1 Nisan, sometimes it's that day, or it's just before it. I mean, if it came on Wednesday, it would still be Shabbat HaKodesh today, but it comes this evening, it's sunset. And there's a special haftarah from it on 1 Samuel chapter 20, which is the subject of today's message. And today's message is going to be about your hearts and where they are. And it's going to be about friendship and why many of us lack true friends. And why that's important to God. But I want to start with what friendship is not, with a couple of humorous tales. The story is told about two avocados. And one day, these two avocados, it says, they were the best of friends. And they were walking down the street together, and they stepped off the curb, and a speeding car came around the corner and ran one of the avocados over. And the uninjured avocado called 911 right away and helped his injured friend as best as he was able. And the injured avocado was taken to emergency at the hospital, rushed into surgery, and after a long and agonizing wait, the doctor finally appeared. He told the uninjured avocado, "I have good news and I have bad news." And the avocado said, "Yes, tell me, please." And the doctor said, "The good news is that your friend is going to pull through. The bad news is that he's going to be a vegetable for the rest of his life." Another story about friendship. This is in a negative format. It's called Two Friends and a Bear. Two friends were walking through the woods when they thought they heard something. And they turned around and saw a big black bear coming towards them. And both men started to run when one of them stopped to change into his tennis shoes, sneakers. The second man said, "You don't have time to change shoes. You can't outrun the bear." So the first guy said, "I know I can't outrun the bear. I only have to outrun you."
Wow.
There are friends and there are friends. You know, long before there was a Batman and Robin, long before there was a Hobbs and Shaw, long before there was a Tom and Huck, long before there was a Charlie Brown and Snoopy, long before there was a Bert and Ernie, long before there was a Ren and Stimpy, long before any of them, there were two special friends. And these two friends had a friendship that was so strong and so loving and so loyal that it has become the standard of faith for measuring all friendships. Long before the term BFF existed, there was Jonathan and David. Jonathan was the truest of friends. His father was the king. Jonathan, you know, he was a golden boy, an accomplished warrior, a respected leader, and heir to the throne of Israel. David, on the other hand, was the youngest son, not of a king, but of a shepherd named Yeshai, also known as Jesse. He and Jonathan probably became friends sometimes after David defeated the giant Goliath. Probably after David came to the palace as a court musician to King Saul, Jonathan's father, to play his harp. Their friendship is the kind of friendship every one of us, me included, Whether you're male or female, whether you're older, younger, even children, this is the kind of friendship that we really long for in our heart of hearts. They were close friends, each one protective of the other. And that's the kind of friendship we all want, isn't it? We want friends to be there for us through the good times and the bad times. Yeah. We want friends who know our faults and love us anyway. We want friends who will accept us and understand us and challenge us and stick by us. We want friends like Jonathan, especially for teens and young adults. As our friendships with parents are changing, when you're teens, when we were teens, coming to the realization that fulfillment now involves much more than just pleasing mom and dad. It involves developing and deepening other relationships. And a key relationship during the coming years of our lives when we are at that age. For any teen, the key relationships are going to be your friendships. Particularly your closest friendships. It's so important for the continued growth and fulfillment, young and old alike. It's so important that you find a friend like Jonathan. That kind of friendship is like a flawless diamond or a string of perfect pearls. It is very rare and very priceless. But how can you find a friend like Jonathan? I mean, after all, there aren't many real princes left, you know. Unless you go to Saudi Arabia. I don't think we want to do that. Let me begin to answer that question by pointing you to 1 Samuel chapter 20. You see, if you truly want to develop a friendship like the one David and Jonathan shared, if you truly want to find a friend like Jonathan, then you need more than anything else to cultivate a heart like Jonathan's heart. A brave heart. You probably heard that old saying that if you wanted to have a friend, you got to be a friend. Well, it's true. If you want a friend like Jonathan, you've got to cultivate a heart like Jonathan. And 1 Samuel 20 helps us understand just what that means. As we look at the 20th chapter of 1 Samuel, Shmuel Aleph, that story of Jonathan's love for David, we should be alert to the 4 characteristics of Jonathan's heart. As you read 1 Samuel chapter 20, you see 4 distinct characteristics in the text that explain Jonathan's character, that explain what kind of heart he had. If you cultivate those characteristics in your own heart and in your friendships, it will help you experience that rare and priceless degree of friendship that few people ever know. So let's get started. 1 Samuel chapter 20. I'll read verses 1 to 4. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and came before Jonathan and said, "What have I done? What is my crime? What is my sin against your father, that he should be seeking my life?" "Never," he said to him. "You will not die. Behold, my father does nothing great or small without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this matter from me? It cannot be." And then David swore again, saying, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes." So he must have thought, let's not let Jonathan know about this, else he will be grieved. But truly as Adonai lives, and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. And then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do it for you." Those 4 verses reveal a very key characteristic of Jonathan's heart that made him such an incredible friend to David, and that is loyalty. In the first 4 verses, we see loyalty. Jonathan was the prince, heir to the throne of Israel. He was next in line. When David came to him with the news that Jonathan's dad was out to get him, Jonathan first responded, "No way." But when David took an oath and used the very serious vow, saying, "But truly as Adonai lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death," Jonathan understood that David was not messing with his head. There was no fooling around here. This was very serious business. And do you see how Jonathan responded once he realized David was absolutely serious? Look at verse 4 again. Then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do it for you." How many friends do you have or have ever had that would say that? Wow. Whatever you say, I will do it for you. That, people, is the voice of loyalty. Jonathan knew that protecting David might cost him his throne, maybe even his life, but he was willing to risk his kingdom for his friend. Now, how does that translate to your life? Contrast that with today's type of friendship, which is marked with a sign on everyone's forehead that says, "Don't judge me." If your loyalty could be measured on a thermometer, would it be closer to freezing or boiling? What are you willing to risk for your friends? Jonathan risked a kingdom. You probably don't have a kingdom to risk. But would you risk comfort? Would you risk popularity, reputation? Be sure you understand that Jonathan risked everything to help his friend David. He was willing to risk his throne and his kingdom in order to protect his friend. David was not Mr. Big Stuff at this time. He was a young son of a shepherd who took care of sheep. He happened to play the harp rather well. But Jonathan, Yochanan, he was the son of King Saul, anointed king of Israel. Amen. He was a very powerful warrior and leader. He wasn't son of a king that you're picturing a 6-year-old going, "Daddy, can I go into the throne room now and play?" No, this was much later in years. And Jonathan was willing to risk his throne and his kingdom to protect David. I don't think Jonathan would have helped David hide a drug habit or keep suicidal thoughts a secret, anything like that. Because to do such things for a friend would be disloyal. Because those things would endanger that friend, not protect him. So if you want to cultivate a heart like Jonathan's heart, you must develop a heart of loyalty. You must develop a brave heart. And now that might mean listening to your friend cry when you really feel like listening to your favorite music instead. It might mean confronting your friend about a bad habit when you have trouble even telling somebody that that they have food stuck in their teeth. And you don't want to say anything, you don't want to offend them, but a true friend tells. And that might mean canceling a trip to the beach to attend the funeral of your friend's grandmother. It might mean sometimes saying to your friend, as Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do it for you." So the first characteristic of Jonathan's heart was loyalty. Write that down. Memorize it. Your heart needs to be loyal. The second characteristic we'll find in verses 5 through 17 of 1 Samuel 20. After Jonathan told David, "Whatever you say, I will do it for you," it says, so David said to Jonathan, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon." Another reason why this passage is read in Shabbat HaKodesh. "Look, tomorrow is the new moon, when I am supposed to sit down with the king to eat. Instead, let me go hide myself in the countryside until the third evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, 'David earnestly asked my permission to run to Bethlehem, his town, for it is the annual sacrifice there for the whole family.' If he says thus, very well, then your servant is safe. But if he becomes very angry, then know that he is determined to harm me. Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of Adonai with you. But if there is any iniquity in me, then kill me yourself. Why should you bring me to your father?" Jonathan replied, "Far be it from you. For if I know for sure that my father has determined evil to come upon you, then wouldn't I tell you about it?" And then David asked Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" Jonathan said to David, "Come, let us go out to the field." So they both went out to the field, and then Jonathan said to David, "By Adonai, God of Israel, I will sound out my father about this time tomorrow or the day after. Look, if it is good toward David, wouldn't I send word to you and disclose it to you? May Adonai do so to Jonathan, and even worse should my father intend to do you evil. And if I don't disclose it to you and send you away, then you may go in shalom. So may Adonai be with you as he has been with my father. Amen. And now, if I am still alive, wouldn't you show me the loyal love of Adonai so I wouldn't die? Yet also, don't cut off your loyal love from my household, ever. Not even when Adonai cuts off all of David's enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan cut a covenant with the house of David. So may Adonai requite David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again because of the love he had for him. For he loved him as he loved himself. Where have we heard that before? Therefore, the second characteristic is love. The first one is loyalty. The second one is love. You want to have true friends, but yet your character is lacking in these things, then you have to change your heart. Second characteristic is love. That was the second characteristic of Jonathan's brave heart. The text says he loved David as he loved himself. Notice that it did not say he loved David more than he loved himself. It says he loved him as he loved himself. That, people, is a picture of godly, biblical friendship. That kind of love of a friend doesn't come along every day. It doesn't. True friends are few and far between. And David's whole life in Scripture described book after book, passage after passage. Yet we see only one friend who was ever this close to him. And that was Jonathan. In his whole lifetime. One. You may have many friends. And you will acquire many more in the years ahead. But very few of those friends, perhaps none, perhaps only one, will love you as you love yourself. You see, it's possible to love someone and yet love that person less than you love yourself. Let me use an example. One rabbi tells about his nephew. He says, "I have a nephew named David. And when David was just learning to talk, one of the first words he learned was please." And the rabbi continues, "Well, I love that little guy, but I loved him less than I loved myself. And I'll tell you how I know. I'm ashamed to admit it now, but I used to be a selfish slug. And I'm now a recovering selfish slug. But it seemed like whenever I would get a bag of M&Ms or a Reese's cup, David would suddenly appear beside me, holding his hand out and saying, 'Please.' And after the first time or two, being the selfish slug that I was, I developed a technique when I saw him coming or heard his word, 'please,' of popping the rest of the candy quickly into my mouth, no matter how much was left, no matter how far it made my cheeks bulge, and saying to little David, 'See? It's all gone now.'" Now, that's a pretty silly example, but it shows you that being a selfish slug, I love David less than I love myself. The rabbi continues, contrasts that with the picture of his wife. The rabbi tells about her, saying, "She's not a selfish slug like me, and never has been one as far as I know. And so I have seen her many times skip breakfast because she calculated there would be just enough milk for her husband and her kids to have breakfast. Or I've seen her use the last dollar to buy a new tennis shoes for one of her kids. Why? Because she loves them more than she loves herself." Now, Jonathan's heart was somewhere in between those two extremes, because it was a heart that loves a friend as much as oneself. So a heart like Jonathan will be a heart of loyalty and a heart of love. The third characteristic is shown in the next part of the story. It's a little lengthy if you want to follow with me. Verses 18 through 41 of 1 Samuel 20. Listen to the story. Then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon. You'll be missed because your seat will be empty. And on the third day, you must go down quickly and come to the place where you hid as you did on that day, and remain close to the stone Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I were shooting at a target. Now look, I will send a lad saying, go, find the arrows. If I specifically say to the lad, see, the arrows are on this side of you, get them, then come, for it is safe for you and no danger, for as Adonai lives. But if I say to the boy, look, the arrows are beyond you, then go on your way, for Adonai has released you. But as for the matter which I and you have spoken about, behold, Adonai is between me and you forever. And so David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat a meal. And the king sat on his seat, as usual, the seat by the wall. And Jonathan stood up, and Abner sat down by Saul's side. But David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul said nothing that day, for he thought, it must be an accident. He must be ceremonially unclean. Yes, that's it. He's unclean. Yet it came to pass in the day following the new moon, the second day, that David's place was still empty. So Saul asked his son Jonathan, why didn't Jesse's son come to the meal yesterday or today? And Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked me leave to go to Bethlehem, as he said, please let me go, for we are going to have a family feast in the town. My brother has commanded me. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me go, please, to see my brothers. That's why he hasn't come to the king's table. Then Saul's rage blazed against Jonathan, and he said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman, don't I know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on earth, neither you or your kingship will be secure. Now send word and bring him to me, for he is a son of death. But Jonathan answered his father Saul, why shouldn't he be put to death? What has he done? And then Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him down. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. So Jonathan rose up from the table in fierce anger and did not eat food the second day of the new month, for he was grieved over David because his father had dishonored him. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out to the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad was with him. And he said to his lad, run, find the arrows that I am about to shoot. And now as the lad was running, he shot an arrow past him. When the lad reached the place at the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out, yelled out to the lad and said, isn't the arrow beyond you? And then Jonathan called out after the lad, quick, hurry, don't stand there. So Jonathan's lad picked up the arrow and came to his master. But the lad knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the arrangement. And then Jonathan gave his weapons to his lad and said to him, go take them back to the town. And as soon as the lad was gone, David emerged from the south side and fell on his face to the ground and bowed down 3 times. And then they kissed each other and wept together, and though David wept more. That passage reveals another key characteristic of Jonathan's heart, and that was accountability. Accountability. Loyalty, love, accountability. If you will add this component to your deepest friendships, it will change your life. Notice that Jonathan made himself accountable to David. Now, he couldn't have done anything he wanted. I mean, he could have, I should say, because his father was the king. He was heir to the throne. He had servants and wealth and all kinds of stuff. But he bound himself to David in friendship in a way that made him accountable to David. Accountability means voluntarily giving another person authority to question you or correct you and hold you responsible for your conduct. Jonathan became accountable to David, accountable to him. by making a vow that he would report his father's intentions to David. He promised to do some reconnaissance for David and signal him as to whether it was safe to return to the palace or not. What will accountability mean in our relationships, in your relationships? Well, the answer is that depends on what your greatest fears and struggles are. But basically it means meeting with a close believing friend or friend of faith every so often in order to talk over your struggles and allowing your friend to hold you accountable for what you do and don't do. In the program Alcoholics Anonymous, they have people called a sponsor. And when you feel you're slipping, you're tempted to go back to drinking or what have you, you call your sponsor and they meet with you or talk with you and try to guide you through the difficult time because you want to go to that bar so bad. We need accountable friends, accountable to us and we accountable to them. We can have loyalty and have love, but if we don't have accountability, then we don't have a true, blessed friendship. You ever hear the saying that friends don't let friends drive drunk? Why is that? We care about them enough not to want them to hurt themselves or die or possibly kill somebody else. And if that means that we take their keys and they curse us out and never want to talk to us again, at least we saved their lives. And we know that in some very, very well-intended friendships end that way at that time. Who are you to take my keys? I was the friend loving you. That's why I took your keys. And one day when you realize that, maybe you can give me a call. I hope I have the same phone number. Let me give you an example. I'm accountable to the accountability board of our congregation. The elders and members are accountable to me. To those open to an accountable relationship, I talk with them often. And I ask them a series of questions which they agree to answer truthfully, such as, have you spent at least a half an hour each day in prayer and in Bible reading this week? It's only 1 hour a day out of a whole day of a week. Just 30 minutes. 30 minutes of prayer, 30 minutes of reading your Bible, or some combination thereof. Have you fallen in any way spiritually that you need to talk it over and have good counsel about getting back on path with God? Things like that. Knowing that I have 3 rabbis to hold me accountable makes me a lot more diligent in keeping my promises to God. Because I know if I blow it, I'll have to admit it to these rabbis. I have to. And I don't want to do that in the first place. And in the second place, because they may require me to straighten my acts and gone too far in some way. If you have trouble making prayer a habit, accountability will mean pledging to pray 5 or 10 or 15 minutes a day and allowing your friend to call you on the carpet if you don't. You might touch base. Hey, want me for coffee later? Yeah, I don't know today. How about tomorrow? Yeah, that's good. Oh, by the way, you prayed today yet? No, I haven't gotten around to it. I'm holding you to that promise. You're right. Okay, as soon as we hang up, I'm going to do it. Accountability. You see, what accountability in your friendships will look like depends a lot on what your struggles and fears are. Jonathan pledged his support in saving David's life, and you may need help in kicking a habit or developing a discipline in your life. So Jonathan's brave heart was characterized by love, loyalty, and accountability. And let me mention one final aspect of his heart, which is mentioned all throughout 1 Samuel 20, but also in the last verse, verse 42, and that is faith. Loyalty, love, accountability, and faith. These are the 4 characteristics. Verse 42 says,
Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in the shalom that we both have sworn to each other in the name of Adonai, saying, may Adonai be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever." Let's close that door, please. One reason David found such a companion with Jonathan is because they shared a common faith. Now hear me out here. Because this is something that a lot of people find difficult to hear, difficult to swallow. But it's going to be crucial if you want to develop friendships like the one between David and Jonathan. Let's go to the New Covenant here. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 is a verse that's usually applied to dating and marriage, but its real application is much broader. That verse says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship does light have with darkness?" Now, I will not tell you that verse says you can't have any non-messianic friends. But what it does say, however, is that you should not allow yourself to be yoked or bound together with a non-believer. And that means that your most intimate friendships that bind you together, must possess a common faith. That was true in Jonathan and David's case. It should be no less true in mine or in yours. What that means is that if your closest friend is an unbeliever, you're on dangerous ground. You see, a yoke, what is a yoke? A yoke is a wooden harness that a farmer would put on the shoulders of 2 oxen or 2 horses to take their strength and bind it together into one effective tool for plowing or clearing land or pulling a cart. They would be locked in together in a yoke. The problem with wearing a yoke, though, is that both animals must go in the same direction. And you, Yeshua following men and women, if you're not pulling your friend toward God, your friend is pulling you away from God. For those of you hearing this message who are not yet believers, I urge you to realize that as much as you may love your friend, you cannot help him or her grow in faith if you don't share that faith. Jonathan was a Braveheart, filled with loyalty, love, accountability, and faith in God. King Solomon says in Proverbs 27, verse 5 and 6, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but excessive the kisses of an enemy." Better to be hurt by a friend than to be kissed by an enemy. And Yeshua tells us about the reward of a good heart when he says in what's known as the Beatitudes, in his famous Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, verse 8, he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Amen. So if you want friends to accept you, understand you, challenge you, and stick by you, you can do no better than to begin cultivating a brave heart, a pure heart like Jonathan's. Of course, that's quite a task, but that's okay, because God is willing to help you. Just ask, as Messiah taught later in that same sermon in Matthew 7, verse 7. "Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened to you." We need to be asking for good, godly friends to come into our life. And those of you who've been with me before, I'm sure you have heard this before. But I want all you brave hearts out there to remember this. The best vitamin for friendship is B1. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.